Welcome. This is a video from the Sweetwater County Historical Museum as a virtual tour of the exhibit Crossroads, Change in Rural America. The exhibit is a partnership between the Smithsonian Institution Traveling Exhibition Services Program Museum on Main Street and the Wyoming Humanities. The exhibit was hosted by the Sweetwater County Historical Museum and the Green River Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center in the fall of 2021, and was on display at the beautiful Green River Chamber of Commerce and Visitor Center, seen here. My name is Aidan Brady. I am the museum's public engagement coordinator, and I will serve as your virtual tour guide today. We begin with the idea of change in rural America. I encourage you to think about what rural means. What does rural mean to you? Do you think this sign represents rural? Why? Over the last century, rural has gone from the primary mode of life to the exception. As of the 2010 census, 71.2% of the U.S. population lived within urbanized areas, while the other 2012 major uses of land in the United States report from the USDA reported only 3% of land use as urban. In the 1920 census, the largest communities in Sweetwater County were Rock Springs, Green River, Granger, Gunn, and Superior/South Superior. The total population of the county was 13,640. As of the 2010 census, that population had grown to 43,806. This exhibit seeks to explore the changes over the last 150 years, particularly in rural communities such as Sweetwater County. The exhibit is divided into 5 themes, each exploring an element of rural life. We will be asking some important questions throughout the video to think about. Feel free to share your answers on social media with hashtag #RuralCrossroads, one word. The first theme and panel is identity. The exhibit attempts to compare the romanticized and artistic depictions of rural life when compared to the still images of reality. A bright and clean set of digital red boards contrasts with the reality of peeling paint on a barn wall. Well-known paintings of rural scenes are contrasted against the often dirty and difficult realities photographed. The exhibit asks us to think about what we think rural means. Do any of these images match your experience? By the definition of the U.S. Census Bureau, urban lands are those that are home to more than 2,500 people, regardless of whether they are incorporated, with rural lands being those that are open country or less than 2,500 people. By this definition, as of 2020, only 2 places within Sweetwater County are urban: Green River and Rock Springs. Both are listed as micropolitan urban clusters by the U.S. Census Bureau. Even the other 4 incorporated communities are rural, making Sweetwater County a rural county. However, as of the 2010 census, 80% of Sweetwater County lived within those 2 urban clusters. Many books, such as The Virginian by Owen Wister and Main Street by Sinclair Lewis, have explored this subject. Wister's depictions would be familiar to many people today, though it is highly fictionalized. Sinclair Lewis's satirical depiction of a small Minnesota town was considered offensive to some residents of his hometown. Both depictions have been important for how people both in rural and urban communities see rural life today. Wyoming and Sweetwater County authors are no different, from books about growing up in Rock Springs to songs about reaching the Sweetwater County line. This next theme discusses the importance of land to rural communities. Land has always been an important part of the American landscape, from the earliest inhabitants to modern residents. Some of the earliest people to live in what is now Sweetwater County were the group known today as the Fremont culture. People gathered and used local rocks to fashion tools and traded them to others. The Shoshone, Ute, and Bannock nations hunted and gathered upon the area and called the land home. However, conflict is a major part of land ownership. The European concept of land ownership has been in sharp contrast with many Native American nations since the earliest days of European settlement. Land occupied by Native American communities has often been viewed as open and available land to the U.S. government and settlers. Many broken treaties continue to be litigated in court. Many conflicts have arisen over the difference of opinion on land use, from conflicts on the range wars to less aggressive but equally as important arguments over water rights. Ownership does not prevent others from using the land, however. Even though most people do not own deeds to rural lands, or even live in them, many Americans continue to access these lands thanks to things such as publicly owned parks and other properties. The modern rural landscape is a patchwork of private and public lands. This is especially visible in the checkerboard visible across the Union Pacific Railroad. Even beyond that, however, private land ownership continues to be associated with the ideas of personal freedom and political power. Many voices in this exhibit even view rural as intimately connected with the idea of freedom. What do rural lands mean to you? This section discusses the importance of community in rural places. Community in rural locations can sometimes be seen to be at a crossroads itself. Out of necessity, many people in these communities pride themselves on their self-reliance while also remaining reliant on each other. Entertainment and other activities often required close connection with each other, and still do. From concepts like barn raisings to local dances, it can be hard to picture a rural community without close relationships. But Main Street has become the strongest symbol of the American community, from small rural towns to large cities. In many communities in the 19th and 20th centuries, rural communities created streetscapes lined with stylish and attractive buildings. Main Street became overlapped with commerce. County seats and towns along the railroads and highway system grew, including places like Green River. Theaters, opera houses, museums, and other cultural venues enhanced the cultures of these communities. Other communities far from these important transportation arteries, however, faded. Some communities struggled to survive as the needs and demographics of the nation and their communities evolved. But many communities have persisted. Some have even thrived. Rural communities are often associated with this next panel, persistence. What would you add or otherwise change to improve your community if you could? Many of the rural locations that continue to survive and thrive have done so due to the work of their most devoted residents. But every community is different. Some communities have formed tightly knit partnerships of local institutions and people to create a thriving but small community. Other locations have worked hard to attract outside businesses, industry, and tourism. Some communities have worked with groups like Main Street America Project to try and revitalize small towns. Both Rock Springs and Green River have organizations devoted to advertising and promoting their Main Street and downtown businesses. From parades to trunk-or-treat celebrations, these organizations work to try and promote the unique character of their individual communities. One of the hardest aspects of modern life for communities and individuals is this last panel, managing change. What happens to rural America matters to all of America. Rural Americans contribute to the economy and culture of America as a whole. Places like Sweetwater County contribute resources such as soda ash, phosphates, and more. Without these communities, America would be a very different place. However, change is a constant, and communities across the nation and world, whether urban or rural, must continue to evolve to meet these new changes. What changes do you want to see? What changes do you think people should be prepared to face in the next 150 years? Thank you for joining us for this short tour of the exhibit. The exhibit was on display until October 24th, 2021. To stay up to date with all of our events and programs, check out our website, sweetwatermuseum.org, or follow the Sweetwater County Historical Museum on your favorite social media. And thanks for watching.